Finally, it's here. The much awaited sequel to the Sega classic Streets of Rage series is out. As nerds who grew up on Streets of Rage 1 and 2 and Bare Knuckles 3, because Streets of Rage 3 wasn't available in our country, we couldn't be more excited. It was rated as one of the most anticipated gaming titles of 2020. At least for those of us who were born in the 80s. So naturally, the first thing we did was get our hands on a digital copy and then spend a week playing it. So, what do we think? Well, Streets of Rage 4 is the Force Awakens of the series. Confused? For that comment to make sense, we need to turn the clock back to the good old days of Sega Genesis or the Sega Mega Drive. Streets of Rage was Sega's answer to Nintendo's Final Fight. Looking back at it today, one could easily dismiss it as a basic side-scrolling beat-em-up game. But it was revolutionary for its time because it had a diverse variety of characters to choose from and its music was just too good for the 16-bit era. Kind of like Star Wars: A New Hope. A year later after its release, Streets of Rage 2 came out, which doubled down on the great music and took the character design and gameplay to a whole new level. It introduced the concept of dash or blitz attack and a new special move which got the players out of sticky situations at the expense of a little health. The game became a benchmark for the series, sort of like The Empire Strikes Back for Star Wars. Then, a year later, Streets of Rage 3 came out. Now this was the most divisive entry in the series. Its history has been well documented by Top Hat Gaming Man. The link to his video is down in the description. The long story short is that two versions of the game were released. One for the USA and the UK, and one for Japan and the rest of the world. Besides language, both versions had minor differences in character design and stage design. The title was criticized for a variety of reasons. It doubled down on robots and overtly sexualized enemies. These cyberpunk, Blade Runner-like elements were confusing for many and offensive to some. The music was way too experimental as opposed to the previous titles and drew heavy inspiration from industrial and punk rock. The markets where the Japanese version was released, gamers were unable to follow the storyline. In defense of Streets of Rage 3, the gameplay was much more fluid than Streets of Rage 2 because the characters could run and roll. The blitz attack would also upgrade in style and impact up to 3 stars upon scoring 40,000, 80,000 and 120,000 points without losing a life. The stages were very inventive with innovative obstacles like trains and traps. Now, coming to Streets of Rage 4. The reason why we call it the Force Awakens of the series is because it is in many ways an example of history repeating itself. It doubles down on nostalgia without bringing anything significantly new to the table. It brings back all the main cast of Streets of Rage 1. The main leads are Axel and Blaze. Adams from Streets of Rage 1 makes a long-awaited comeback as an unlockable character. There are 2 new characters, one of which is Cherry Hunter, daughter of Adam, who is the replacement of Sammy, Adam's kid brother from Streets of Rage 2 and 3. The other is Floyd Area, a student of Zan from Streets of Rage 3, who reminds us of Jax from Mortal Kombat. The graphics are an exit from the art style of the previous entries and feature 2D character designs and anime-like animation, which is very easy on the eyes. All the classic human enemies are back along with a few new interesting additions. The gameplay has a couple of new features like a combo system and the ability to grab and throw weapons in mid-air and a unique star move for every player. 4 players can play simultaneously and there is the online playing experience as well. Yuzo Koshiro and Motohiro Kawashima return to score the game and offer a very mature, jazz-like upgrade to the soundtrack which feels new and familiar at the same time. And that's where all the feel-good factors end. Upon repeat playing, you start to feel the diminishing returns. You feel the game is playing it safe and lacking in inventiveness. In that sense, it is very much a rehash of Streets of Rage 2. You can also call it Terminator Dark Fate of the series. Anyway, it brings back all the main cast of Streets of Rage 1. The stages may look new but offer very few environmental challenges. The characters cannot run or roll to evade incoming attacks, making the gameplay feel tedious. This becomes extremely annoying when facing off against certain harder enemies and bosses. The only exceptions are Cherry Hunter, who can sprint, and Adam, who can fade in a particular direction. There is an option to play with retro music from Streets of Rage 1 and 2. Even the secret stages, and yes, there are a few, feature the bosses from Streets of Rage 2. This entry almost feels like an attempt to wipe out the existence of Streets of Rage 3. And it has derived many elements from the fan-made Streets of Rage remake, such as the chance to play with retro characters and the stage on top of a running train where the player has to jump over incoming poles. If only the developers would have taken a little more inspiration from that title, like the ability to choose our path or bike and jet ski sequences. Street Fighter is a great example of a game from the old days that has managed to remain fresh and relevant even in today's times. It is still based on the same principle as the original title. However, with a contemporary design aesthetic, engaging storytelling, new characters, and innovative moves and specials, it has managed to gain popularity and attract new audiences over the years. For us, Streets of Rage 4 scores a solid 3.5 out of 5. It may not offer anything new, but it is still plenty of fun playing with friends. While our experience of playing the game was lukewarm, we sincerely hope that this is the beginning of the series' revival, and we will continue seeing new, innovative Streets of Rage titles in the future. In the meantime, we will wait for Streets of Rage 5. Do you think we have Star Wars a little too much on our mind? Well, we've got news for you. There is no such thing as too much Star Wars. Ha! But you cannot ignore the similarity between the journeys of the two properties. Expect a new video on Star Wars real soon. Till then, nerd out.